Two very big things have been happening at the UN World Headquarters this week. Two very big things that are both very exciting for the international community. Firstly, the newly elected president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, addressed the United Nations General Assembly yesterday afternoon, and his speech was a great departure from the last 8 years of the previous Iranian President, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Last year, in 2012, as you may remember, Ahmadinejad's General Assembly address was infuriating, insulting, and provocative. But President Rouhani is not Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. Yesterday, in a well-crafted speech that gave the world and Iran something to think about, Rouhani addressed Iranian concerns, such as the commonality of militarism as a convenient replacement for actual diplomacy, international diplomacy and discussion appearing as a Western monologue, and the issue of Western xenophobia, but also of international concerns, such as the recent and ongoing wars in the Middle East, the issues circling the conflict in Syria, and the rise of global extremism. Rouhani mentioned many times throughout his speech that it is the end of a zero-sum game in foreign affairs. And he went on to talk about his aspirations for a world of peace, a world at peace, and working together to prevent violence and extremism.
We should accept and be able to open a new horizon in which peace will prevail over war, tolerance over violence, progress over bloodletting, justice over discrimination, prosperity over poverty, and freedom over despotism.
The world is expecting great things from this president. And from all initial signs, Hassan Rouhani means to deliver. He has a much more rounded worldview. And he was the primary moderate candidate in this summer's Iranian election campaign. A world united against violence and extremism sounds like it could be a long way off, but here's to hoping Mr. Rouhani can bring it just a little bit closer. The other exciting thing going on in the UN this week is the United States' ratification of an arms trade treaty. More specifically, a treaty that creates a responsibility for countries supplying weapons to other countries, by attempting to ensure that these weapons don't end up in the hands of groups intending to perpetrate acts of genocide or terrorism. First, let's go into the definition of weapons within this treaty. It covers things like battle tanks, armored combat vehicles, large caliber artillery, combat aircraft, attack helicopters, warships, missiles and their appropriate launchers, and finally, small arms and light weapons. This treaty was proposed, drafted, and put in front of the UN General Assembly this past March 2013, and all but 3 member nations voted in favor. Those opposed were sort of predictable: Iran, North Korea, and Syria. Since that vote in March, 90 nations have ratified the treaty, and just this morning, Secretary of State John Kerry made the United States the 91st ratified member of the treaty. That said, the Senate still has to confirm the ratification, and with a 2/3 majority, no less. For many Republicans sitting in the Senate, voting for this treaty is going to be a tough sell. See, the language of the treaty puts a lot of responsibility on the nations selling the weapons. They are required to investigate the party or parties receiving the weapons and determine whether or not those parties pose a threat against human rights, or if the weapons could end up in the hands of entities that do pose a threat to human rights. The treaty also requires the nations selling the weapons to loop the UN Secretariat in on their findings. It seems perfectly innocuous unless you're a genocidal maniac, right? Well, apparently wrong, because right-wing media in the US has been demonizing this treaty since its inception for one simple reason: it's gun control. Apparently, a UN-led effort to create some sort of background check for large-scale international weapon sales is a very, very terrible thing in the minds of the NRA and Fox News. They seem to think that international gun control, which has no effect on US domestic policy, is going to lead the UN to start flying around the US in black helicopters and take everyone's guns away. It's getting really, really hard to take the right seriously anymore, and they still get votes. But here's to hoping, fingers crossed, that the Senate actually does manage to pass this bill. That does it for News Things tonight. Thanks for watching.